Hello and welcome back to the Haunted Slumber. Before we begin tonight's story, take a moment to get comfortable, close your eyes, and let your mind drift. If you're enjoying these tales, don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment. I'd love to know where you're listening from around the world. Now let the lights dim, the curtain rise, and may this story guide you into a deep, haunted sleep. The Keeper of the Lighthouse. The wind howled through the narrow alleys of the old coastal town of Blackwood, carrying with it the scent of salt and decay. The sea crashed violently against the rocky cliffs, its relentless roar echoing like 1,000 mournful voices. Samantha Holt pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders as she walked along the desolate shoreline. The town's pier jutted out like a skeletal finger, its wooden planks creaking under the weight of the wind. It had been years since she last set foot in Blackwood, years since her brother, Jacob, had disappeared without a trace. Now she was back to face the nightmares that had never truly left her. The locals still spoke of Jacob in hushed tones, their eyes darting away whenever Samantha passed by. Whispers of what happened to him, of what he had seen, lingered like the fog that blanketed the town each night. They said he had been obsessed with something in the sea, something he claimed was calling to him. But the sea held more than just whispers. Samantha's gaze drifted to the water, where the waves churned violently against the rocks. In the distance, she could just make out the outline of the old lighthouse, its once bright beacon now dark and lifeless. Jacob had been last seen there, staring out at the water, muttering about voices and shadows beneath the surface. As she stood there, the wind picked up, and for a brief, chilling moment, Samantha thought she heard it too. A voice, faint and distant, rising from the depths. A single word, echoing through her mind. Return. Samantha blinked, shaking her head to dispel the eerie sensation. It was just the wind, nothing more. But as she turned away from the water, a shiver crawled down her spine. The lighthouse loomed in the distance, its shadow stretching over the cliffs like a dark omen. She forced herself to move, her boots crunching against the gravel path that led back toward the town. The wind gusted, carrying with it the scent of seaweed and something else, something foul, like rotting fish. As she walked, the memories came flooding back. Jacob had always been drawn to the sea. As children, they would play along the shoreline, skipping stones and collecting shells. But one summer, everything changed. That was when the sea began to call to him. Samantha? A familiar voice snapped her out of her thoughts. She turned to see Victor Kane, a childhood friend and now one of Blackwood's few remaining fishermen. His dark eyes studied her with a mixture of concern and wariness. "You came back," he said, his tone flat. "I had to," Samantha replied. "I need to know what happened to Jacob." Victor's jaw clenched. "You know what happened. He drowned, just like the others." Samantha shook her head. "They never found his body. They never found any of them." Victor's eyes darkened. "Maybe that's for the best." Samantha narrowed her gaze. "What do you know, Victor?" Victor glanced nervously toward the sea. The waves crashed harder against the rocks as though the ocean itself was listening. "There are things in that water, Samantha. Things that shouldn't be there. Things that call to you. And once you hear them." He trailed off, his face pale. "What?" Samantha pressed. Victor swallowed hard. "You can't ignore it. The call. It gets inside your head. It twists things. That's what happened to Jacob. He heard it too." Samantha's heart pounded. What did he hear? Victor shook his head, his gaze distant. Voices. Singing. Like a lullaby, but wrong. Like it was coming from somewhere deep beneath the waves. He said it called his name over and over. A chill crept down Samantha's spine. Did you hear it too? Victor's eyes met hers, and for a moment she saw the haunted look in them. Every night, he whispered. And I still do. Before Samantha could respond, Victor turned and walked away, his shoulders hunched as though carrying a great weight. Samantha stood there, watching him disappear into the fog. The air was colder now, the wind sharper. The sea churned violently against the rocks, and for a brief moment she swore she could hear it too, a distant, echoing voice calling her name. That night, Samantha couldn't sleep. The tiny room she rented at the Blackwood Inn was cold and damp, the walls thin enough to hear the wind howling outside like a pack of hungry wolves. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying Victor's words in her mind. Every night. And I still do. What had Jacob heard? What was Victor still hearing? The room seemed to press in around her, the shadows growing longer, darker. Samantha closed her eyes, trying to calm her racing thoughts. But that was when she heard it. A soft melodicum. Her eyes snapped open. The sound was faint, drifting through the air like a lullaby carried on the wind. But it wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from somewhere deeper, somewhere far below. She threw off the covers and sat up, her pulse pounding. The room was empty, but the sound persisted. It was almost beautiful, a haunting, sorrowful song that echoed through her mind. The melody was familiar, and as she listened, she realized she'd heard it before. Jacob had sung it to her when they were children, a song their grandmother used to sing to them, a lullaby meant to soothe, to comfort. But now it was anything but comforting. The sound grew louder, echoing through her head like 1,000 voices singing in unison. It was hypnotic, drawing her in, making her want to close her eyes and drift away. Samantha. Her name. Samantha jerked to her feet, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The sound cut off abruptly, leaving only the silence and the steady pounding of her heart. She rubbed her temples, trying to shake off the lingering echo. Was she losing her mind? Or was the call getting to her, just like it had to Jacob? A sudden knock at the door made her jump. She crossed the room and opened it to find Victor standing in the hallway, his face pale and drawn. "You heard it, didn't you?" he asked, his eyes wide. Samantha swallowed hard. "The singing." Victor nodded, glancing nervously down the hallway. "It's getting worse. It started after Jacob disappeared. Some say it's the sea. Others say it's something in the sea. Something ancient." "What do you mean?" Samantha asked. Victor leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "There are stories, old stories, about this town. About things that came from the water. About them. Victor shuddered. "The ones who sing. The ones who call." Samantha's skin prickled with cold. "And what do they want?" Victor's jaw clenched. "They want us to join them. To come to the water. To drown." A sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, and for a moment Samantha thought she could hear it again, the faint, mournful song calling to her from the depths. The next morning, Samantha made her way down to the docks. The fog hung heavy over the water, blurring the line between sea and sky. Boats rocked gently in the harbor, their ropes creaking like old bones. Victor was there, coiling a rope with shaking hands. He looked up as she approached, dark circles under his eyes. "Couldn't sleep," he muttered. "They sang all night." Samantha nodded, her own eyes heavy. "I heard it too." Victor's jaw clenched. "It's getting worse." Samantha glanced toward the sea where the waves crashed relentlessly against the rocks. The lighthouse loomed in the distance, its windows dark and empty. The closer she looked, the more she swore she could see shapes moving beneath the surface, dark, writhing shapes. "Victor," she said, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "You said there were stories. Old stories. About what's out there." Victor swallowed, his eyes darting toward the water. "My grandmother used to tell us about them. About the ones who live beneath the waves. The ones who wait. Wait for what?" Victor's voice dropped to a whisper. "To be found. To be freed." A chill ran down Samantha's spine. Freed from what? Victor licked his dry lips. They were sailors once. Or so the story goes. Cursed men who lost their way at sea. They drowned, but they didn't die. They became something else. Something that calls to the living. Samantha's stomach twisted. And the singing? They say it's their way of luring us to the water, Victor said. To drag us down and make us one of them. Samantha shook her head, fighting the rising sense of dread. That's just a story. Victor's eyes hardened. Then why is Jacob still out there? Why do we keep hearing his voice in the waves? Samantha opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, a sudden shout echoed across the docks. Help! Someone, help! Samantha and Victor turned to see a fisherman running toward them, his face as white as a sheet. It's Tom. He's out there. He jumped in. Samantha's heart lurched. What? The fisherman pointed toward the water. He said he heard his wife's voice. But his wife's been dead for years. Before anyone could react, Victor was already sprinting toward the edge of the pier. Samantha followed, her feet pounding against the wooden planks. When they reached the edge, they saw it, a single, bobbing shape in the water. A man, flailing against the waves, his eyes wide and unseeing. Tom! Victor shouted. Tom grabbed the rope, but Tom didn't seem to hear. His mouth moved, his lips forming words as he gazed blankly at the water. The wind carried his voice to them, and Samantha's blood ran cold. I'm coming, Martha, he said, his voice soft and dreamy. I hear you. I hear you singing. Before anyone could stop him, Tom's head dipped below the surface, his hands slipping under the waves as though pulled by unseen hands. Samantha leaned over the edge, her breath coming in quick, panicked bursts. But the water was empty. Tom was gone. Victor swore under his breath, yanking the rope back in. It's them. The drowned ones. Samantha swallowed, her eyes fixed on the churning sea. What do they want? Victor didn't answer. But as they stood there, staring into the abyss, the wind carried that eerie, haunting melody to them once more, a mournful lullaby that echoed through the fog, chilling them to the bone. The fog thickened as the day wore on, swallowing the town in a dense, suffocating mist. The streets were empty and the shops were closed. Even the seagulls had fallen silent, as though sensing the tension that clung to the air like a shroud. Samantha sat at the counter in the Blackwood Inn, a cup of lukewarm coffee cradled in her hands. The innkeeper, an older woman named Marla, wiped the counter absently, her eyes darting to the window every few seconds. You heard about Tom? Marla asked, her voice low. Samantha nodded. Did they find him? Marla shook her head, her jaw tight. Not yet. But they won't. They never do. Samantha frowned. What do you mean? Marla leaned closer, her expression grim. Tom isn't the first, and he won't be the last. Samantha's pulse quickened. How many? Marla lowered her voice, her eyes dark and haunted. 6. 6 men in the past 5 years. All gone without a trace. All heard the singing before they vanished. Samantha set her coffee down, her hands trembling. Did you hear it too? Marla's gaze dropped to the floor. Once, after my husband disappeared. Samantha swallowed hard. What did you hear? Marla's lip quivered. His voice, calling my name, telling me to come to the water. I almost did, but something stopped me. Something or someone. A chill ran down Samantha's spine. Who? Marla didn't answer. Instead, she straightened up, her eyes hardening. You should leave, Samantha. Before it's too late. Before Samantha could respond, the door swung open and Victor stumbled in, his face pale and wet with sweat. They found him, he said, his voice shaking. They found Tom. Marla's eyes widened. Alive? Victor shook his head, his gaze distant. No. And it wasn't just him. Samantha stood up. What do you mean? Victor swallowed hard. They found 4 bodies tangled in the fishing nets. All men. All drowned. and all of them still singing. Samantha followed Victor to the docks, her heart pounding in her chest. The crowd had gathered around a group of fishermen, their faces ashen as they dragged the net onto the pier. Samantha pushed through the crowd, her breath catching when she saw the bodies. For men, their faces blue and bloated, their eyes wide and staring. Their mouths hung open as though frozen mid-scream. But the worst part was the expression on their faces, not fear, but a look of utter, haunting ecstasy. Victor stood beside her, his jaw clenched tight. "Do you see it?" Samantha nodded, her skin prickling. Each man's mouth was stuffed with wet seaweed, strands of it hanging from their lips like the tendrils of some deep-sea creature. One of the fishermen stepped forward, his eyes wild. "They were singing when we pulled them up. Even after they were dead, they kept singing." The crowd murmured, some crossing themselves, others whispering in hushed tones. Samantha's eyes scanned the bodies, her gaze falling on Tom's lifeless face. His lips twitched, a faint gurgling sound escaping his throat. Samantha's breath caught. It was the same melody, the same haunting, mournful lullaby that had echoed in her mind last night. Without thinking, she stepped forward, leaning down to listen. The sound was faint, like a breath of wind through reeds, but it was there, the song, the call, drifting up from Tom's mouth. "Samantha!" Her blood ran cold. It wasn't Tom's voice. It was Jacob's. She staggered back, her heart pounding, the world spinning around her. Victor grabbed her arm, his eyes dark and urgent. "It's getting worse," he said. "Whatever this is, it's spreading. And it's coming for you." The sound of the singing haunted Samantha long after they left the docks. It lingered in her mind like a splinter, twisting deeper with every passing second. Back at the inn, she locked herself in her room and paced the floor, Jacob's voice still echoing in her ears. The words were muffled, distorted, a lullaby turned nightmare. She grabbed her phone and dialed her mother's number. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "Mom, it's me," Samantha said, her voice shaking. "I'm in Blackwood. I think I heard Jacob. I know how that sounds, but I need to know if you ever heard it too. If he ever said anything before he disappeared. Call me back." She ended the call and threw the phone onto the bed, rubbing her temples. The wind howled outside, rattling the window panes like a frantic, skeletal hand. A soft knock echoed through the room. Samantha's head snapped up. "Who is it?" she called. No answer. She moved to the door, her heart thundering. The hallway was empty. Only the wind, moaning through the cracks like a lost soul. But as she closed the door, a faint sound drifted up from below, singing. Samantha swallowed, her mouth dry. She grabbed her coat and stepped into the hallway, her footsteps muffled by the thick, threadbare carpet. The sound grew louder as she descended the stairs, each note pulling her closer like a siren's call. The inn's lobby was empty, the lights dim, but the singing persisted, echoing through the air like a lullaby from a distant, darkened room. Samantha followed it down a narrow corridor, past the kitchen and into the back storeroom. The door stood ajar, revealing a flight of stairs leading down into the basement. The song echoed up from below, soft and haunting. A man's voice, Jacob's voice. Samantha's hand trembled as she gripped the railing, descending the creaking stairs. The basement was cold, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and mildew. Shadows twisted in the corners, and the walls seemed to close in around her. At the far end of the room, a figure stood facing the wall, shoulders hunched, back turned. The singing came from him, his voice low and rhythmic, like a chant. "Jacob," Samantha whispered, her throat tightening. The figure didn't move. The singing continued, the melody rising and falling in that same haunting rhythm. Samantha stepped closer, her pulse racing. "Jacob, is that you?" The figure turned. It was Tom. His eyes were wide and staring, his mouth open as the song poured from his lips. But his expression was blank, devoid of life, as though he were a puppet being controlled by unseen hands. Samantha gasped, stumbling back. Tom's eyes locked onto hers, and his mouth continued to move, the words pouring forth in that eerie, hypnotic melody. "Join us in the water, join us in the deep." Samantha's heart pounded, her back hitting the wall. The room seemed to spin, the shadows pressing in. The singing grew louder, echoing through her skull like the relentless crash of the waves. Join us in the deep." Samantha squeezed her eyes shut, her head throbbing. The song was everywhere now, filling every corner of the room, every crevice of her mind. And then silence. Samantha's eyes snapped open. The room was empty. The basement was dark and still. Tom was gone, but the echo of the song lingered, drifting through the air like a chill wind. And somewhere, from the depths of the sea, Samantha swore she could hear it. The voices of the drowned, calling to her, beckoning her to join them in the abyss. Samantha burst through the door of the Blackwood Inn, her breaths coming in ragged gasps. The sky outside had darkened and rain poured down in relentless sheets, turning the streets into rivers of murky water. Victor was waiting for her in the lobby, pacing nervously. His eyes widened when he saw her. "Samantha? What happened?" Samantha shook her head, unable to speak. She collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands. The song still echoed in her mind, the haunting refrain swirling around her like a fog. Victor knelt beside her, his hands gripping her shoulders. "Samantha, look at me. What did you see?" Samantha lifted her head, her eyes glassy. "Tom, he was in the basement. He was singing." Victor's jaw clenched. "Tom is dead." "I know," Samantha cried, her voice trembling. "But he was there, Victor. And he was singing that song. The same one I heard last night. The same one Jacob used to sing." Victor released her shoulders and stood up, pacing the room. "This can't be happening. It can't be." Samantha swallowed, her throat dry. "Victor, what if it's not just the sea? What if it's something in the sea?" Victor stopped, his eyes fixed on the window. The rain lashed against the glass, and somewhere in the distance, the lighthouse's beam sliced through the fog like a knife. "My grandmother used to tell stories," he said, his voice hollow, "about the things that live below. The drowned ones. Those who died at sea but never truly left. They linger, trapped between worlds, and they sing to lure the living down to join them." Samantha shivered, the memory of Tom's empty, staring eyes flashing through her mind. "You think that's what happened to Jacob?" "To Tom?" Victor nodded, his jaw tight. "They say the drowned ones can take the form of those they've claimed. They mimic their voices, their faces. They call to the living, trying to drag them down, one by one." Samantha stood up, her fists clenched. "Then what do we do? How do we stop it?" Victor met her gaze, his eyes dark and haunted. "We find the source. We find where the singing is coming from. And we end it." They made their way through the rain, the storm raging like a living thing. The wind howled, tearing at their clothes, and the waves crashed violently against the rocks, sending sprays of icy water into the air. Victor led the way, flashlight beam cutting through the fog. "The singing always gets louder at the lighthouse. That's where it's strongest." Samantha followed close behind, her heart pounding. The lighthouse loomed ahead, a towering silhouette against the darkened sky. Its windows were shattered, the door hanging open on rusted hinges. They stepped inside, the air thick with the scent of salt and rot. The floorboards creaked beneath their feet, and somewhere above them, the wind whistled through the broken glass like a ghostly wail. Victor shone the flashlight around the room, illuminating the peeling wallpaper and rotting furniture. "This place has been abandoned for years," he said. "Ever since the lighthouse keeper disappeared." Samantha shivered, her eyes scanning the shadows. "What happened to him?" "No one knows," Victor said, moving toward the staircase. "But they say he was the first to hear the singing." The stairs groaned under their weight as they climbed, each step echoing through the empty tower. The higher they went, the louder the wind became, until it was a deafening roar, mingling with the faint, haunting melody drifting through the air. Samantha's skin prickled. "Do you hear that?" Victor nodded, his face grim. "It's them." They reached the top of the tower, stepping into the lantern room. The glass was shattered and the rain poured in, pooling around their feet. Victor moved to the edge, his flashlight beam sweeping over the black, churning waves below. "Look!" Samantha stepped up beside him, her breath catching in her throat. The water below was teeming with shapes, dozens of them bobbing and swaying in the waves. Pale faces with hollow eyes, their mouths moving in unison, singing that same eerie lullaby. "It's them," Victor said, his voice a mere whisper. "The drowned ones." Samantha's heart pounded, her gaze fixed on the water. The song rose and fell, the melody haunting and hypnotic, wrapping around her mind like a net. "Samantha!" The voice was Jacob's, clear as day, echoing up from the depths. "Samantha, come to me." Samantha took a step forward, her eyes unfocused, her mind foggy. The wind howled and the drowned ones sang, their voices rising in a mournful chorus. Victor grabbed her arm, yanking her back. "Don't listen to it. It's not him." Samantha shook her head, her vision clearing. "Victor, they're all here. All the missing men. And Jacob." Victor's grip tightened. "Then we need to end this. Now." Samantha looked down at the waves, at the ghostly faces staring up at her, their mouths open in that haunting, endless song. "How?" she asked, her voice shaking. Victor's eyes darkened. "By cutting off the source. By destroying the one who started it all." Samantha frowned. "The lighthouse keeper?" Victor nodded. "They say he drowned himself at the base of the lighthouse. That he still lingers there, singing to the drowned ones. If we can find him, if we can break the connection, maybe we can free them." Samantha swallowed, her gaze fixed on the dark, churning water below. The singing grew louder, more insistent, the melody wrapping around her mind like a noose. "Then let's end it," she said, her jaw set. "Before it ends us." The storm raged as they descended the lighthouse stairs, each step echoing like a drumbeat through the hollow, crumbling tower. The wind screamed through the broken windows, and the voices of the drowned ones echoed faintly beneath it, their song rising and falling like the restless tide. Samantha and Victor stepped out onto the rocky shore, the rain driving into their faces like needles. The ocean churned violently, waves crashing against the rocks with relentless fury. Victor gripped her arm, his jaw set. The keeper's body was never recovered. They say he threw himself off the rocks right there. He pointed to a jagged outcropping at the base of the lighthouse, half submerged by the roiling waves. Samantha nodded, her throat tight. The song was louder now, the melody clearer, a low, haunting lullaby drifting up from the depths. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, threading through the wind and rain like a spectral whisper. "Do you hear it?" Victor asked, his eyes dark and haunted. Samantha swallowed. "Yes, and it's getting closer." Victor's eyes scanned the water, his knuckles white around the flashlight. If he's still here, if he's still controlling them, he'll be down there, waiting. Samantha nodded, her heart pounding. "Then that's where we have to go." Without another word, they moved toward the rocks, their feet slipping on the slick, seaweed-covered stones. The waves surged around them, icy water soaking through their clothes. Samantha shivered, her gaze fixed on the black, heaving water. The faces of the drowned ones floated just below the surface, their eyes wide and staring, mouths moving in unison as they sang. Samantha! Jacob's voice drifted up from the depths, soft and mournful. Samantha, come to me. Samantha's breath caught in her throat. The song wound through her mind, threading through her thoughts like a silver cord, pulling her toward the edge of the rocks. Victor grabbed her arm, pulling her back. Stay with me. It's not him. Samantha shook her head, the fog lifting slightly. I know. Victor turned toward the water, his eyes narrowing. There. Samantha followed his gaze. A shadowy figure stood in the water, half submerged, its back to them. It was tall and gaunt, its shoulders hunched, its head bowed. The waves lapped against its legs, but it did not move. The song rose, louder now, the melody growing more insistent, more desperate. Samantha, come to me. Samantha took a step forward, her heart pounding. Jacob? Victor gripped her arm, his voice low and urgent. That's not Jacob. That's him. The figure in the water turned slowly, its movements jerky and unnatural. Samantha's blood ran cold. The face staring back at them was twisted and bloated, skin gray and puckered like rotting flesh. Its eyes were empty sockets, black and bottomless, and its mouth hung open, seaweed spilling from its lips. The song echoed from its throat, the same haunting lullaby, but now it was louder, more urgent, more commanding. Samantha, come to me. Victor raised the flashlight, the beam slicing through the rain. It's the keeper. He's the one calling them. The figure stepped forward, water streaming from its tattered clothing, seaweed hanging from its limbs like shrouds. Its mouth moved, the song growing louder, the words wrapping around Samantha's mind like a vice. Samantha, join us in the deep. Samantha clutched her head, her vision blurring. The drowned ones were rising from the water, their faces bobbing to the surface, eyes fixed on her. Their mouths moved in unison, echoing the keeper's call. Join us in the deep. Victor stepped forward, grabbing a rusted metal rod from the rocks. Samantha, get back. Before she could respond, the keeper lunged, its bony hands reaching for her. Victor swung the rod, the impact sending the creature reeling back into the water. Go! Victor shouted. Get to the lighthouse. Samantha stumbled back, her feet slipping on the rocks. The drowned ones surged forward, their hands reaching, mouths gaping as the song poured from their throats. Join us, join us. Victor swung the rod again, striking one of the drowned men in the face. Its head snapped back, but it didn't stop singing. The keeper rose from the water, his empty eyes fixed on Samantha. Samantha, come to me. The song filled her head, drowning out her thoughts, pulling her down, down, down. Samantha. Victor's voice cut through the fog. Samantha blinked, the world snapping back into focus. The keeper was right in front of her, his mouth inches from her face. The stench of rot and seaweed washed over her, and his icy fingers wrapped around her wrist. Join us. Victor swung the rod again, the metal connecting with the keeper's skull with a sickening crack. The creature reeled back, releasing Samantha's wrist. Run! Victor shouted. Samantha turned and sprinted toward the lighthouse, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The drowned ones surged after her, their song rising to a fever pitch, their voices merging into one relentless, hypnotic chant. Join us in the deep. Samantha burst through the lighthouse door and slammed it shut, throwing the deadbolt. The drowned ones pounded against the door, their fists hammering the wood like the crash of the waves. Victor staggered inside, dripping wet, his face pale. We can't hold them off forever. Samantha nodded, her chest heaving. Then we have to end this. Now. Victor met her gaze, his eyes fierce. How? Samantha swallowed, her hands trembling. By finding the keeper's heart. The pounding on the door grew louder. the wood creaking and splintering under the force of the drowned one's fists. Their voices echoed through the tower, the eerie lullaby wrapping around Samantha's mind like a shroud. Victor grabbed a nearby chair and wedged it against the door. "That won't hold them for long," he said, his breath coming in short gasps. Samantha wiped the rain from her eyes, her gaze darting around the room. "You said the keeper's heart. What did you mean?" Victor moved to the staircase, eyes scanning the shadows. "There are stories, old stories. They say when the keeper threw himself from the rocks, he left something behind. Piece of himself. A part that still lingers." Samantha shivered, the memory of the keeper's blank, staring eyes flashing through her mind. "His heart." Victor nodded. "If we find it and destroy it, we might be able to break the connection. Free the drowned ones." Samantha swallowed, her mouth dry. "Where would it be?" Victor hesitated, his gaze fixed on the staircase leading up to the lantern room. If he wanted to keep it close, it would be up there. A loud crash echoed through the room, and the door buckled inward, splinters flying. The drowned ones pushed through, their lifeless eyes fixed on Samantha and Victor. Their mouths moved in unison, the song spilling forth like a funeral dirge. "Join us." In the deep, Samantha grabbed Victor's hand. "Go!" They sprinted up the stairs, the drowned ones shuffling after them, their wet, heavy footsteps echoing up the tower like a death march. The staircase spiraled upward, each step creaking under their weight. The wind howled through the broken windows, rain slashing against their faces as they climbed higher and higher. Samantha's legs burned, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The song followed them, growing louder, closer, the words wrapping around her mind like a vice. "Join us, join us." Victor pulled her forward, his grip tightening. "Don't listen to it. It's trying to pull you in." Samantha nodded, forcing herself to focus on the steps beneath her feet. The lantern room loomed above them, a circle of shattered glass and twisted metal. They burst into the room, slamming the door shut behind them. The wind howled through the broken windows, and the lighthouse's beams sliced through the fog like a knife. Victor scanned the room, his eyes wild. Where is it? Where would he have hidden it? Samantha's gaze darted around the room. The walls were lined with rusted metal cabinets and old wooden crates. The floor was littered with shattered glass and twisted shards of metal. Then she saw it. In the center of the room, half hidden beneath a pile of old, rotting cloth, sat a wooden chest. Its surface was carved with intricate, swirling patterns, the same patterns she had seen on the keeper's wrists, the same patterns she had seen in her dreams. "There!" Samantha shouted, rushing forward. Victor dropped to his knees beside the chest, his hands shaking as he gripped the rusted latch. The drowned ones' voices echoed up the stairwell, their song growing louder, closer. Victor threw open the lid, and a foul, rotting stench filled the room. Inside the chest lay a heart. It was blackened and shriveled, its veins twisted and knotted like old roots. But it was still beating, its pulse slow and rhythmic, each throb sending a wave of dark, oily liquid seeping across the wood. Samantha's stomach turned. What the hell? Victor's face was pale, his eyes fixed on the heart. This is it. This is what's keeping them here. A deafening crash echoed through the room, and the door burst open. The drowned ones flooded in, their eyes fixed on the chest, their mouths moving in unison as the song poured forth. Join us, in the deep. Victor grabbed the heart, his hands sinking into its rotting flesh. Samantha, we have to destroy it. Samantha grabbed a shard of broken glass from the floor, her hands shaking. The drowned ones surged forward, their hands reaching, their mouths open wide as the song rose to a fever pitch. Join us, join us. Victor lifted the heart, holding it aloft. Now, Samantha, now. Samantha raised the shard of glass and drove it down, slicing through the heart with all her strength. A scream echoed through the room, a deep, guttural howl that seemed to shake the very walls of the lighthouse. The drowned ones staggered back, their faces contorting in pain, their eyes rolling back in their heads. The heart shuddered, dark liquid pouring from the wound, its pulses growing weaker, slower. Samantha raised the glass again, her jaw clenched. For Jacob, she drove the glass down once more, slicing the heart in two. The scream rose to a deafening pitch, then cut off abruptly. The heart stopped beating. The black liquid seeped across the floor, pooling around Victor's knees. The drowned ones collapsed, their bodies hitting the floor with wet, sickening thuds. Their eyes stared blankly at the ceiling, their mouths open but silent. The song had stopped. Samantha dropped the shard of glass, her hands shaking. The room was silent, the wind whistling through the shattered windows. Victor released the heart, his hands stained with the dark, oily blood. It's over, he said, his voice hollow. Samantha fell to her knees, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The room spun around her, and she closed her eyes, the echoes of the song still drifting through her mind. But as she sat there, listening to the wind howl through the lighthouse, she heard something else. A faint, distant sound, carried on the wind like a whisper. A voice. Samantha, come to me. Samantha's eyes snapped open. The room was empty, the drowned ones lying motionless on the floor, their lifeless eyes staring up at the ceiling. The lighthouse was silent, save for the wind howling through the shattered windows. Victor staggered to his feet, wiping his hands on his soaked jeans. Did you hear that? He asked, his voice trembling. Samantha nodded, her heart pounding. It was Jacob. Victor swallowed, his gaze darting around the room. But that can't be. We destroyed the heart. It should be over. Samantha rose to her feet, her legs unsteady. The air in the room felt heavy, thick with the scent of salt and rot. The black liquid from the heart still pooled around their feet, seeping into the cracks in the floorboards. A chill ran down her spine as the voice echoed through her mind again, softer this time, but clearer. Samantha, come to me. She turned toward the window. The fog outside was thick, swirling in hypnotic patterns. Beyond it, the ocean churned violently, the waves crashing against the rocks. Victor stepped beside her, his brow furrowed. What do you see? Samantha leaned forward, squinting through the fog. There, just beyond the rocks, a figure stood in the water. It was Jacob. His face was pale, his eyes wide and staring. His mouth moved, but she couldn't hear the words. Samantha's breath caught in her throat. It's him. He's out there. Victor grabbed her arm. No, it's not him. It's the keeper. He's trying to draw you in. Samantha shook her head, her eyes locked on the figure. No, it's Jacob. I know it. Victor pulled her back from the window, his grip tight. Listen to me. We destroyed the heart, but that doesn't mean the keeper's gone. Whatever he was, whatever he became, it's still here. Samantha's mind spun. If they had destroyed the heart, why was Jacob still there? Why was he still calling to her? The voice echoed through her mind again, softer, sadder. Samantha, help me. She tore herself from Victor's grasp and sprinted toward the stairs. I have to get to him. Samantha, no. Victor shouted, running after her. She barreled down the spiral staircase, her feet slipping on the wet steps. The fog outside was thicker now, pressing against the windows like a living thing. The air was heavy, cold, suffocating. Samantha burst through the lighthouse door and stumbled onto the rocks. The ocean roared around her, waves crashing against the stones, spraying her with icy water. Jacob stood in the surf, his eyes fixed on her. His lips moved, but the wind swallowed his words. Jacob, she screamed, her voice hoarse. Victor ran up behind her, grabbing her arm. Samantha, stop. It's not him. Samantha wrenched free, her eyes fixed on Jacob. Jacob, I'm coming. She plunged into the water, the icy waves swallowing her up to her waist. The cold bit into her skin, but she pushed forward, her eyes locked on Jacob. Jacob! He stood motionless, the water churning around his knees. His eyes were hollow, his skin a sickly gray. Samantha reached out, her hand trembling. Jacob, it's me. Jacob's lips moved, his voice a ragged whisper. Samantha, please, help me. Victor's voice echoed behind her. Samantha, get out of the water. Now. But she couldn't move. The waves tugged at her legs, pulling her deeper. Jacob's eyes met hers, and for a brief, horrifying moment, she saw the keeper's face staring back at her. Samantha, join us. Jacob's mouth opened wide, wider than any human mouth should. The inside was black, endless, a void that seemed to stretch on forever. Before Samantha could scream, the water surged around her, pulling her under. The ocean closed over her head, the cold biting into her skin like 1,000 knives. The water was thick, heavy, pressing against her lungs, forcing the air from her chest. She thrashed, kicking against the current, but the waves dragged her down, deeper and deeper. The light from the lighthouse above grew dimmer, fainter, until it was nothing but a distant, flickering pinprick. And then she heard them. The drowned ones. They surrounded her, their faces blank and lifeless, their eyes wide and staring. Their mouths moved in unison, and the song rose up around her, a chorus of hollow, echoing voices. Join us in the deep. Samantha's lungs burned, her vision blurring. She opened her mouth to scream, but the water rushed in, filling her throat, her lungs, her mind. Jacob's face floated before her, his eyes empty, his lips moving in that same terrible song. Join us in the deep. Samantha's vision went black. The world around her dissolved into nothingness, a dark, endless abyss. And then, somewhere in the darkness, a hand reached for her. Samantha! Victor's voice pierced through the void, and she felt herself being pulled up, dragged toward the surface. The water rushed past her, the light growing brighter, and then she broke through the surface, gasping for air. Victor hauled her onto the rocks, his face pale and terrified. Samantha, are you okay? She coughed, sputtering up seawater, her chest heaving. Jacob, he's still down there. Victor shook his head, his eyes dark. No, Samantha. He's gone. Samantha sat up, shivering, the wind biting into her wet skin. The lighthouse loomed over them, its light spinning in slow, sweeping arcs. Victor's hand tightened on her arm. We have to get inside. Whatever the thing was, it's not finished with us yet. Samantha nodded, her heart pounding. The echo of the song still lingered in her mind, a haunting, endless refrain. Join us in the deep. Samantha stumbled to her feet, her legs weak from the cold and exhaustion. Her fingers trembled as she wiped the seawater from her eyes. But she couldn't shake the feeling that the ocean was still pulling at her, trying to drag her back into its depths. The sound of the waves crashing against the rocks, the endless call of the drowned ones. It all felt so close, like it was inside her, echoing in her very bones. Victor was already moving toward the lighthouse, his steps quick, determined. He glanced back, his face taut with fear. "Come on, Samantha. We need to get inside before it's too late." Samantha didn't argue. Her mind was too clouded, too tangled in the memory of what she had seen beneath the water. What had happened to Jacob? Had he truly been lost to the keeper, or was something else still holding him captive? Deep in the ocean? She followed Victor up the slippery rocks, the cold wind stinging her face as they reached the door to the lighthouse. Victor pushed it open, his eyes scanning the dim interior, his posture tense. They stepped inside, the door slamming shut behind them. The smell of salt and decay clung to the air, and Samantha felt a shiver run down her spine. It was as if the lighthouse itself was alive, a twisted thing that fed off their fear, their desperation. Victor turned to her, his voice low and strained. "Samantha, listen to me. Whatever that thing was, whatever we're dealing with, it's not over. We can't just run away from this. We need to find a way to stop it." She nodded, her mind racing. "But how? How can we stop something like that? It's been here for so long." Victor's eyes narrowed, his jaw clenched. "I don't know, but there has to be a way. We've got to figure it out before it claims anyone else." Samantha's gaze flicked toward the window. The fog outside was thicker now, pressing against the lighthouse like a wall of darkness, and the ocean roared beneath it, a deep, threatening growl. And then she heard it, that same voice, that same echo in her mind. The soft, seductive whisper, "Join us." In the deep, she clutched her head, her breath quickening. It was everywhere now, in her thoughts, in her soul. Victor reached out, his hands gripping her shoulders tightly. "Samantha, we can't let it get to you. Stay with me." But the whisper only grew louder until it was all she could hear. "Join us." In the deep, Samantha staggered back, her vision blurring, the darkness pressing in on her from all sides. The lighthouse began to spin, the walls shifting, the ground beneath her feet feeling unstable, as though the building itself was losing its grip on reality. Victor's voice cut through the fog of her mind. "Samantha, listen to me. You're stronger than this. Don't let it win." She forced her eyes open, fighting to focus. The room seemed to shift in front of her, the walls pulsing, the air thick with the smell of brine and decay. The flickering light from the lighthouse swept across the room, casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. Victor was there, standing before her, his face strained with worry. "We need to figure out what happened to Jacob, Samantha. He might still be out there, but we can't wait much longer." Her heart clenched at the thought of Jacob. She couldn't let him go, not like this. The faint whisper of the ocean filled her mind again, and she turned toward the door, her pulse racing. She had to go back. She had to find him. Victor grabbed her wrist. "No, Samantha, you can't go back out there. It'll claim you too. You don't know what it will do if it gets you." Her breath came in ragged gasps, her pulse pounding in her ears. I have to try." She pulled free from his grip, her feet moving before she could stop herself. The door to the lighthouse opened with a heavy creak, and she stepped back into the darkness, the wind howling like a beast, the fog thick around her. Victor's voice came from behind her, desperate. "Samantha, please." But she didn't stop. She couldn't. Jacob was still out there calling to her, and she had to answer. The waves crashed violently against the rocks as she descended toward the shore, the darkness closing in on her from all sides. The ocean, that endless, unknowable abyss, stretched out before her. She waded into the water once more, the chill seeping into her bones as the waves surged around her. The water was deeper now, the current stronger, as if the ocean itself was pulling her under. "Jacob!" she cried, her voice lost to the wind. "I'm here. I'm coming." But the sea only answered with silence. Then, through the fog, she saw him. Jacob. He was standing in the water, his eyes wide, his skin gray and bloated, his mouth open as if to scream. But no sound came from him. Instead, there was only the horrible, endless song. "Join us!" In the deep, Samantha's heart raced, terror rising in her chest. She stepped forward, her feet sinking into the muck at the water's edge, her body trembling. "Jacob, please!" Her voice was hoarse, desperate. She reached out to him, her fingers brushing the cold water. Suddenly, a figure appeared behind Jacob, looming in the mist. It was the keeper. His eyes were black, empty pits, and his mouth stretched open in a grotesque smile. Samantha's blood ran cold. She realized then, with a sickening certainty, that Jacob was not the one calling her. He was being controlled, trapped within the keeper's grasp. She turned, intending to run, but her legs betrayed her. The water pulled at her, dragging her down as the keeper's voice echoed in her mind. "Join us!" And then, everything went black. Samantha's consciousness flickered like a dying ember, her senses barely registering the passage of time. It felt like she was floating, suspended between worlds, unable to move or speak. The oppressive weight of the ocean pressed against her from all sides, suffocating her in a cold, murky void. The only sound was the endless whispering, the distant calls of the drowned souls. "Join us in the deep." Her body felt numb, as if the sea had claimed every part of her, wrapped her in its watery embrace. But through the haze, a faint glimmer of awareness began to stir. She wasn't alone. There was something else, something pressing against her thoughts, pulling her toward the surface of her mind. A sharp intake of breath, a gasp, as if breaking free from a dream. Suddenly, the fog of the ocean lifted, and Samantha's eyes flew open. She was no longer in the water. The cold, salty waves had retreated, and she found herself lying on the sand. She coughed, choking on the remnants of seawater in her lungs, her chest heaving as she struggled to breathe. Victor's face loomed above her, his hands gripping her shoulders, his eyes wild with panic. "Samantha, you're alive. I thought I lost you." Her vision blurred as she looked up at him, confusion clouding her thoughts. How had she made it back to shore? What had happened? The waves crashed softly against the shore as if nothing had happened at all. But in the pit of her stomach, Samantha felt that something had shifted, something had changed, and it wasn't over. I don't remember," she muttered, her voice trembling. Victor shook his head, his grip tightening on her. "It's okay. It doesn't matter. You're safe now." But Samantha wasn't so sure. The whispering, the call of the keeper, was still there, echoing in her mind like an invasive parasite, pulling at the edges of her thoughts. She could feel it just beneath the surface, like the pulse of the ocean itself. "Victor," she sat up, her hands pressed to the sand as she tried to steady herself. "We need to find Jacob. He's not gone. He's still out there." Victor's face hardened. "Samantha, listen to me. We can't go back. The keeper is too strong. We don't know what it will do next. It's not just the ocean. It's the lighthouse, the whole place. It's cursed. There's nothing we can do. Her heart hammered in her chest, a familiar dread curling around her. But we can't just leave him there. We can't let it take him. Victor's eyes softened for a moment, a flicker of understanding in them, but his jaw clenched. I know, but we don't even know what we're dealing with anymore. We're not just fighting the ocean. The keeper, that thing in the lighthouse, it's pulling us in. I don't care, Samantha whispered fiercely, the urgency in her voice cutting through the fear. We have to try. He's still alive, Victor. I can feel him. Victor hesitated, his eyes darting to the dark, looming silhouette of the lighthouse in the distance. The wind howled and the fog had thickened once again, the sea becoming a swirling, foreboding mass. All right, he finally said, his voice steady but strained. We do it together. But we go in with our eyes open. No more mistakes. Together, they rose, their feet sinking into the sand as they began the trek toward the lighthouse. The closer they got, the heavier the air felt. The lighthouse stood tall and imposing, its dark windows like hollow eyes staring down at them. Samantha's mind raced. She couldn't explain it, but every part of her screamed that Jacob was still here, that he was somewhere within the lighthouse. But why? What did the keeper want with him? What had he done to him? They reached the door to the lighthouse, the same door that had once seemed like an escape. Now it felt like an entrance to something far worse. Victor reached for the door handle, his breath shaky as he turned it. The door creaked open, and they stepped inside. The air inside was thick with the scent of dampness and decay, a far stronger stench than the one outside. The lighthouse was alive in a way that wasn't natural. Every corner seemed to vibrate with an unseen energy, the walls groaning as if they were holding something back. Jacob? Samantha called out softly, her voice trembling. There was no answer, just the faint echoes of her words bouncing off the walls. They moved deeper into the lighthouse, their steps slow and cautious. Every sound, every creak of the floorboards made Samantha's skin crawl. The whispering, the call of the keeper, it was louder now, pulsing through the very walls of the lighthouse. Victor stopped suddenly, his hand resting on the railing of the spiral staircase. Samantha, do you hear that? The whispering. It was there again, clearer now. It was like a chant, a rhythm of words that seemed to be coming from every direction at once. Samantha's heart raced. It's him. It's the keeper. Victor turned to her, his eyes wide with fear. We need to find Jacob fast. Without another word, they began to climb the staircase, the air growing colder as they ascended. The higher they climbed, the more oppressive the atmosphere became, the walls narrowing around them as if the lighthouse itself was squeezing them, closing in. At the top, the door to the lantern room loomed in front of them, its surface cracked and weathered. The faint glow of light from within seeped through the cracks, casting eerie shadows across the staircase. Victor reached for the door handle, his hand trembling. This is it. Samantha nodded, her chest tight with fear. Let's do this. With a deep breath, Victor pushed open the door. The lantern room was dim, the light flickering weakly in the corner. And there, standing in the center of the room, was Jacob. His face was gaunt, his skin pale, as if drained of life, but his eyes were filled with something unearthly. Something hollow. And then she saw it. The keeper. It stood just behind Jacob, its form indistinct and shifting, like a shadow made flesh. Its eyes were black pits, and its mouth stretched open in an endless grin. Jacob! Samantha cried, rushing toward him. But as she reached out to touch him, the keeper's voice filled her mind, its words slithering into her thoughts like poison. Join us in the deep. Samantha froze, the world spinning around her. Jacob's eyes flicked to hers, but there was nothing left in them. He was gone, lost to the keeper's will. Don't let it take you too, the keeper whispered, its voice cold and ancient. Samantha's blood ran cold. The keeper was not just trying to drown her. It was trying to possess her, to claim her soul as it had claimed Jacob's. She felt the pull, the weight of it dragging her toward the darkness. But there was still hope. She wasn't alone. With a surge of strength, she grabbed Victor's hand, pulling him toward her. "We need to get out of here. Now." They turned and bolted for the door, the keeper's laughter echoing behind them, a sound that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. But as they fled down the staircase, Samantha felt a strange sensation. The keeper's presence, the pull, was fading. Slowly, they were escaping. They burst out of the lighthouse, the cold night air hitting their faces. The fog had lifted slightly, revealing the dark outline of the sea stretching out before them. But the feeling of being followed, the whispers, the haunting presence, never left. It was still there, lingering just beyond their reach. Samantha turned to Victor, her voice barely a whisper. "Is it over?" Victor didn't answer. He couldn't, because deep down he knew the truth. It was far from over. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of what had just occurred hanging heavy in the air between them. The lighthouse behind them loomed like a dark sentinel, its twisted silhouette a constant reminder of what they had escaped and what they had not yet fully escaped from. The wind had picked up, carrying with it the faintest echo of the keeper's whisper, still threading its way into Samantha's mind. "We need to leave," Victor said quietly, his voice rough as if the night had drained him of more than just energy. Samantha didn't argue. Her gaze was fixed on the lighthouse, but she could feel the pull, a gnawing sensation in her chest. It was as if something inside of her was calling her back, urging her to return to the source of the darkness. She fought it, desperately trying to focus on the task at hand, to get away, to put distance between them and the nightmare they had barely survived. Together, they stumbled down the narrow path toward the edge of the cliffs, the ocean crashing violently below. The fog had thickened again, but this time it felt more oppressive, like the atmosphere was closing in around them. The air smelled different now, saltier, heavier, as if the very earth was aware of their presence and was pushing them toward the water. They reached the old road, the one that led back to the small town at the foot of the cliffs. There were no lights in the distance, no signs of life. It was as if the whole town had been swallowed by the same darkness that had claimed the lighthouse. Samantha's steps slowed, her body fighting exhaustion. She was cold, drenched in sweat, and she couldn't shake the sensation that they weren't alone. The feeling of being watched, of something or someone shadowing their every move, was unbearable. "Victor," she whispered his name, her voice trembling. "We can't just leave. We have to finish this. We can't let the keeper win." Victor stopped and turned to face her, his expression grim. "Samantha, I don't think we can fight it. We barely survived. We need to go. We need to put this behind us." But Samantha wasn't listening. She could still hear the keeper's voice in her mind, as though it was alive inside her, whispering its promises, calling her to join it. She stepped away from Victor, her mind clouded with determination. "I can't just walk away from this. You don't understand. We've only seen the surface of it. The keeper, whatever it is, it's still out there." Victor's eyes flickered with uncertainty. "What do you mean out there?" "We're leaving, Sam. It's over. Let's go." "No," she shook her head, her voice growing stronger. "I have to stop it. For good." Victor took a deep breath, his jaw clenched, and stepped closer to her. He reached out, taking her arm gently. "I don't want to lose you, Sam, but I can't keep going in circles. We can't keep fighting it. It's a force far older than anything we understand. The lighthouse, the sea, it's all connected. We're just intruders in its world." Samantha's heart sank, and for a moment she considered his words. Was he right? Were they really just puppets in a greater game that they couldn't possibly comprehend? But then she saw it just beyond the horizon, where the dark sky met the ocean. A glimmer of light. It was the lighthouse beacon, the flickering glow reaching out like a pale, ghostly finger beckoning her back. She knew that this was no coincidence. The keeper had not let her go, and the light was a warning. It wasn't over. The entity was calling them back to finish what it had started. "I can't just run away," she whispered, more to herself than to Victor. "Not now. It will never stop haunting us. Not until we end it." Victor stared at her, conflicted. He could see the fire in her eyes, the same fire that had driven them both into the nightmare in the first place. But he also knew the dangers they faced, the horrors they had barely survived. His heart ached with the thought of losing her to something that wasn't truly human, something so much older and more powerful. "We need a plan," he said after a long pause, his voice steady now, though his hands shook with fatigue. "If we're going back, we have to be smarter than we were before. We can't let it manipulate us." Samantha nodded. "I don't care how. I just know we have to stop it before it takes anyone else. Before it claims anyone else's soul." With heavy hearts and minds full of fear, they made their decision. They would return to the lighthouse. They would face the keeper once and for all. The road back to the lighthouse felt like an endless journey, each step heavy with the weight of uncertainty. They could no longer trust the world around them. Every shadow, every gust of wind, every crack in the earth felt like an omen, a sign that the keeper was closing in, waiting to claim them. By the time they reached the base of the cliffs, the lighthouse towered above them once more, its light flashing in eerie intervals, casting long, twisted shadows across the land. They stood at the edge of the cliff, staring up at it, knowing that this was the final step. This was the point of no return. They had already come too far to turn back now. The door to the lighthouse opened easily this time, as if it were waiting for them. Inside, the cold air seemed to wrap around them like a living thing, and the whispering began again, louder than before. The walls themselves seemed to be pulsing, breathing with the rhythm of the keeper's call. But they were determined now. There was no turning back. They climbed the stairs once more, but this time they moved with purpose, not fear. At the top, the lantern room beckoned them, its light more intense, as if it were alive, pulsing with power. Jacob was waiting there, his eyes wide and vacant, the same hollow expression that had taken him before. And the keeper, that presence, that force of nature, was with him. Its form was clearer now, more solid, like a twisted shadow of the ocean itself. It spoke, its voice a blend of all the voices of the sea, of the drowned, of the lost. "You have come back, but you cannot stop me," it said, its voice a low, guttural sound that vibrated through the air. "You are nothing. You are part of me now." Samantha felt the pull again, stronger than before. The keeper's voice was inside her mind, inside her soul. But this time she was ready. This time she wasn't afraid. "We'll see about that," she whispered as Victor stepped forward, his hand on the hilt of the knife they had brought with them, a weapon born of desperation. The final battle was about to begin. The keeper's laughter reverberated around them, echoing through the walls of the lighthouse like 1,000 voices from the depths of the ocean. It was not just a sound. It was a presence, a force that seemed to warp the very air around them. Samantha could feel it curling inside her chest, suffocating her, urging her to surrender, to let go. Victor stood beside her, his eyes fixed on the flickering light of the lighthouse, his hand gripping the knife. He looked like a man on the edge of a precipice, ready to dive into the abyss, but not without a fight. He knew they had no choice but to face this entity, to destroy it or die trying. "Do you feel it?" Samantha whispered, her voice trembling. Victor nodded, his jaw tight. "I feel it. It's inside of us. But we can't let it control us." The keeper's form shifted before them, twisting in the air like a shadow moving against the light. The shape was not human, not even truly monstrous. It was something older than the lighthouse, than the island itself. It was the embodiment of the deep ocean, of the forgotten, of the things that lurked beneath the surface. The keeper's eyes, if they could even be called eyes, glinted with malicious intelligence. "You are so naive," it hissed, its voice dripping with ancient disdain. "You think you can destroy me? You think you can break me with a mere blade? I am the tide. I am the wind. I am the ocean's depths. I am time itself." Victor's grip tightened on the knife. "No, you are nothing. You're just a thing that feeds on fear, on the souls you steal. But we're not afraid anymore." Samantha stepped forward, her heart pounding. She didn't know how much of her was still her own, how much of her had been claimed by the Keeper's voice. But she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't let it win. She couldn't let it take them again. Without thinking, she reached into the pouch at her side and pulled out a small vial of salt, the same salt they had brought from the town below. She held it out in front of her, her hand trembling, and began to chant softly under her breath. She had no idea if it would work. It was a desperate hope, a last-ditch effort to drive away the thing that had been haunting her, consuming her thoughts. The Keeper recoiled at the sight of the salt, its form shuddering violently. It hissed again, this time louder, more enraged. "You think salt will stop me? Foolish children." But Samantha stood firm, her chant growing louder, her voice gaining strength with every word. Victor joined her, his voice rising in unison, their chants weaving together like an incantation, a prayer for deliverance. The air around them crackled, the lighthouse flickering as though the very structure was struggling to hold on. And then it happened. The Keeper shrieked, its form unraveling, twisting in agony. Its voice filled the room, a cacophony of rage and terror, but there was something else beneath it, a faint cry, like a distant call from the deep ocean, one that seemed to echo in their souls. The Keeper's form collapsed, rippling like water, and then it was gone. The lighthouse seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as quickly as it had descended. Victor let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding, and Samantha staggered back, the vial of salt still clutched in her hand. Her heart was racing, but there was an undeniable sense of peace filling her chest. It was over, for now, but she knew deep down that the battle was far from won. The Keeper was not truly gone. They had only driven it back, pushed it into hiding once more, but it would return. It always returned. Victor looked at her, his eyes full of uncertainty, of fear, but also a flicker of hope. "We did it. We stopped it." Samantha shook her head slowly, her voice quiet but resolute. "No, Victor, this isn't over. Still out there, watching, waiting." She turned toward the door, the lighthouse behind her still looming, its light now flickering with an unsettling calm. "We'll have to destroy it for good. We have to go back, and we have to end it once and for all." Victor stepped up beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder. "And we will, Sam, together." With the dawn creeping on the horizon, casting pale light across the now silent island, they knew their journey was far from over. But for the first time since they had arrived, they were no longer afraid. The Keeper had been driven back, but it was not finished. Not yet, and they would not rest until it was.